Stop fighting your heartbreak alone. And I don't mean that in the cliche, go call a friend type of a way. I literally mean stop fighting it yourself, because I think that the way that you're doing it right now, it's actually making the pain last longer than it needs to. And I completely get it, because I used to be this way. I used to be the guy that never asked for help. And I had this narrative in my head that if I asked for help, I was no longer the strong one. If I needed help, it meant that I wasn't capable. But during a really bad breakup, I actually did something that I never did before, right? I went to go to a retreat to help me move through the pain that was coming up because of the heartbreak. And during that retreat, someone there told me something that was actually quite annoying to me at the time. They told me that my independence, this thing that I was so proud of, wasn't actually a strength, but it was a trauma response. And that I was trying to handle it myself because I thought that needing people was weak. But that mindset was exactly what was keeping me stuck. And so as I looked into this pattern, this way of being deeper, I realized that healing solo can force you into 3 specific traps that make it much harder to move on. And so that is what I am going to be sharing with you in this video. And so the first trap that I want to talk about is the willpower myth. And so when you are sitting there thinking, I should be able to handle this, why can't I stop thinking about them? You are making a category error. So you are thinking that you are failing a test of willpower, that you are not disciplined enough, but you aren't. Right? You are actually fighting biology, because when you go through a breakup, everything in your life gets shaken up, and your body, your biology, is one of the main things that doesn't feel stable. And so when you are trying to muscle through it on your own, it's like you are trying to fix a broken leg by just walking on it more, walking on it harder, and that doesn't work, right? You need a system, because usually what happens is we also start beating ourselves up when we can't stop thinking about them. And sometimes it can feel noble, but it's actually just really inefficient, right? And so we want to get out of this way of thinking of like, oh, I just have to white knuckle my way through this. I just have to force myself to stop thinking about them. Because when you're dealing with a body problem, the solution isn't to think about it more, right? You have to deal with the body problem by dealing with the body. And so this is the first trap that we get into. And so if this is sounding interesting to you, I would invite you to work with me deeper. This is some of the work that I love doing. And so in the description below, you'll find some links where we can actually take this on together, and I can help you move through this breakup in a way that feels efficient, in a way that feels stable, in a way that brings back your focus and your productivity. So if that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and take a look and figure out how we can work together deeper on this. And so this brings us to the second trap, which is what I call the pause button mistake. And usually when we are trying to handle it alone, what we're actually doing is just distracting ourselves. They oftentimes are very, very clever ways to distract ourselves. And so we aren't actually intentionally healing. We're just putting a pause on it all. And so to do this, oftentimes we will throw ourselves into work. We will binge watch a series that we've already seen millions of times. We will scroll through Instagram or other social media apps. We'll jump into dating before we're ready, or we'll take on some new hobby. And ultimately what we're trying to do is we will do anything to avoid being with the things that this breakup is stirring up within us. And because there's no one to check on us, right, because we're so dead set on doing it alone, doing it ourselves, no one is actually asking, how are you really doing? And so we can get away with it. We convince ourselves that because we aren't crying on the floor right this minute, right this second, we're actually moving on. But distraction isn't healing. It's just pushing the pain. It's just kicking the can to the next month, maybe even to the next year. And so we ultimately want to get out of this trap of pressing the pause button, and we want to start bringing in exercises, bringing in tools that allow us to be with the pain that this breakup is stirring up within us. And that leads us to the last trap, trap number 3, which is the I'm fine mask. And so this can be one of the most insidious ones, right? You wear this mask to work, you wear this around your family, you wear it around your friends because you don't want to be a burden, right? So you're pretending. And the problem with pretending is that, again, it prevents you from actually processing and being with the grief. You're performing okayness for an audience of nobody really, just yourself. And so the longer that you keep this mask on, the longer your healing timeline gets. And so I think the real strength here isn't about how much you can carry without buckling, without falling down. It's about knowing when the load is too heavy and actually putting it down for a second. But in order to understand when the load is too heavy, again, you need to have an understanding of your own body. You need to have an understanding of your own capacity. You need to have an understanding of what too heavy feels like. And so when you are getting these little notifications from your body, you can then take the appropriate steps so that you can use the tools and the resources so that you can start to take off this mask and start doing the intentional work to heal. So again, if this is resonating with you, if this is feeling like you are in a similar space where you are trying to do this all alone and you think that you have to do it alone, and that if you ask for help, that you are weak, then I would invite you to do the work to move past this pattern, to get out of this trauma response of feeling like you need to do it all alone. And I would invite you to work with me deeper. So below in the description, you will find the links, and I invite you to click on them. I invite you to read what's on those pages so that we can figure out a way to work deeper on this. And so the last thing I want to share with you before I end this video is that when you decide to stop doing it alone, when you start to get support, that's the first step. But what can often happen is you get into this trap that I call the physical trap, right? And we start moving our body, which can be a very, very powerful tool, but again, not when we're using it to distract, not when we're using it to avoid. Because once you start trying to fix things, usually you'll start being open for more advice. And the first piece of advice that a lot of people get is just hit the gym. Right? They think, I'll just get a revenge body and I'll feel better. And so you can already hear in the energy of that that's not in the most intentional way to be, right? And so it can often backfire when we start going to the gym. And so I did a whole breakdown on why this is such another trap, right? And why this can backfire, and why just going to the gym and sweating it out and like working on your physical body isn't going to get you where you think it's going to get you. And so on the bottom here, you'll see a link to this video, and it's called Hitting the Gym Won't Fix Your Heartbreak. And so I invite you to check that out. So thank you for your presence. I know this is a tender time, but with intentional work, you will get through this. So thank you again so much for your presence. Peace. I will see you in the next video.